A courtroom sketch artist draws the same defendant for 6 weeks straight, and by week 3, something in the face has already given the verdict away. Not because the artist knows something the jury doesn't, because faces do something under sustained, high-stakes pressure that almost nobody consciously controls, and it turns out you're doing the exact same thing right now, in situations with far lower stakes than a criminal trial. Here's the strange part. Archives of courtroom sketches drawn over the course of long trials, weeks, or even months of a single face rendered day after day by the same artist, reveal a pattern that has almost nothing to do with guilt or innocence, and almost everything to do with how a face behaves when it's being watched constantly for a very long time. Sound familiar? It should, because you experience a small, low-stakes version of the exact same phenomenon anytime you're watched closely for an extended period, in a job interview that runs long, a first date that stretches past the easy small talk, a video call where you can see your own face the entire time. For years, researchers who study facial expression and long-duration social pressure have looked at what happens to a person's face over hours, days, or weeks of sustained scrutiny. What they found complicates a very old assumption, the idea that a guilty face looks different from an innocent one in some clean, readable way. It doesn't, at least not in the way courtroom sketch artists, jurors, or television dramas have long assumed. What changes instead is something subtler. The sheer duration of being watched slowly erodes a person's ability to maintain a consistent, composed expression regardless of guilt. Here's the mechanism worth understanding. Researchers who study emotional labor, the effort required to maintain expression that doesn't match your internal state, have found that this kind of sustained facial control draws on the same limited mental resource used for concentration, decision-making, and self-control in general. It's not free. Holding a calm, neutral expression under scrutiny costs something moment to moment, and that cost accumulates. Over minutes, it's manageable. Over hours, it becomes taxing. Over weeks, for some people, it becomes almost impossible to sustain without visible cracks appearing. This is why courtroom sketch archives often show something counterintuitive. It's frequently not the guilty defendants whose faces seem to slip the most. It's whoever is under the most sustained psychological load, which can just as easily be an innocent person terrified of being wrongly convicted, or a witness reliving trauma repeatedly under cross-examination, or even, occasionally, an exhausted juror. Which reframes something people assume constantly in courtrooms and everywhere else, that a person's face reveals their inner truth if you just watch closely enough. What it actually reveals, according to this research, is how much energy someone has left to keep controlling their face, which is a measure of exhaustion and cumulative stress, not honesty. Now here's where it gets stranger. A separate line of research, this time looking specifically at what facial slips tend to look like under sustained pressure, found that they aren't random. As emotional labor resources deplete, certain small, specific muscle movements become dramatically more likely to appear involuntarily. Brief tightening around the eyes, a flicker at the corner of the mouth, a slight asymmetry that wasn't there earlier. These aren't signs of lying. They're signs of a system running low on the resource needed to keep the face perfectly composed, the same way your hand might start trembling slightly after holding something heavy for too long, regardless of whether you're a strong person or a weak one. Think about the last time you sat through an unusually long meeting, trying to keep an engaged, pleasant expression on your face for far longer than felt natural. By the end, you likely weren't thinking any differently than you had at the start, but your face almost certainly had started slipping in small ways you never consciously noticed, tiny fatigue cracks appearing in an expression you'd been holding up entirely on willpower. Here's the part that should genuinely reframe how you think about reading people. If facial tells are primarily a signature of sustained effort in depleting resources rather than a window into truth or deception, then a huge amount of amateur lie detection, the instinct to believe you can spot a liar by watching their face closely enough, might be measuring something almost entirely unrelated to honesty. It might simply be measuring how tired someone's facial muscles have become, how depleted their self-control resources are in that specific moment, Factors that have far more to do with how long they've been under observation, how much sleep they got, or how personally threatened they feel, than with whether what they're saying is true. This also explains a strange asymmetry courtroom experts have noted for years. Experienced, confident defendants, regardless of guilt, often maintain far steadier expressions across long trials than nervous, inexperienced ones, simply because confidence and familiarity with high-pressure scrutiny reduce the emotional labor cost of holding a composed face. Meanwhile, an innocent person terrified of the process, unfamiliar with courtrooms, watched for the first time in their life by a room full of strangers deciding their fate, may burn through their facial composure far faster, producing exactly the kind of shifty, inconsistent expression untrained observers mistakenly read as guilt. Let's go a layer deeper. Researchers studying long-term surveillance footage in unrelated contexts, security checkpoints, extended negotiations, marathon interviews, have found the same depletion pattern showing up reliably, regardless of what the person being watched was actually thinking or feeling internally. The face, it turns out, isn't a transparent window into the mind. It's more like a muscle group being asked to hold a difficult position for an uncomfortably long time. Eventually, no matter how honest or dishonest the person underneath it is, that muscle group starts to tremble. This raises an unsettling, clarifying thought about every high-stakes interaction you've ever had. The version of you that shows up in the first 5 minutes of a stressful conversation and the version of you that's still there an hour later, exhausted from maintaining composure, are not equally reliable signals of what you actually think or feel. The longer you're watched, the less your face is telling anyone about your honesty, and the more it's simply telling them how tired your expression-holding muscles have become. Think about the last time you caught your own reflection during a long, high-stakes video call and were startled by how strained your expression looked, despite feeling completely calm on the inside. That gap between what you felt and what your face was doing wasn't a sign that something was secretly wrong. It was simply the cost of sustained observation finally showing up on the surface. The same cost every defendant, witness, and juror has been quietly paying in courtroom sketch archives for as long as trials have lasted long enough for a single face to be drawn again and again and again. And maybe that's the real answer to why your face sometimes betrays you under pressure. It was never really about what you were hiding. It was about how long you'd been asked to hold still.